Hello and welcome. I'm SAG-AFTRA Executive Vice President Ben Whitehair. Thank you all for joining us for another SAG-AFTRA live stream on YouTube. To stay current with all of our live stream and video events, we invite you to subscribe to this channel, which you can even do right now. Today, as always, we are joined by two American Sign Language interpreters, Lindsay Gibbons and Mara Bassani Santamaria. Lindsay and Mara will be switching off periodically throughout today's discussion. As a reminder, today's program is being recorded and you can watch the replay right here on SAG-AFTRA's YouTube channel, along with tons of other incredible content. Today's PTEOE, President's Task Force on Education, Outreach, and Engagement, live stream discussion Spotlight on Self-Tapes comes together by popular demand. Everyone is talking about self-tapes. Some of us love them, some of us hate them. Either way, they are a reality for all of us and have evolved from a mere convenience pre-pandemic to a standard practice in the past 2 years. And while self-tape auditions have become the norm, what's decidedly not normal is how frequently they include requests that place an undue burden on our members. Last week, we sent out a survey asking for you all to tell SAG-AFTRA more, and thousands of you have already filled that out and delivered. We want to know things like, have you been asked to shoot in multiple locations, perform unsafe activities, provide numerous props or styling, not given enough time to prepare? We've heard it all, and today we're going to talk about self-tapes and what SAG-AFTRA is doing to address the challenges that self-tapes create for our members. This is important. The survey is still open. So if we haven't heard from you yet, please fill it out. A link to the survey was included in the Watch Now email that was sent out to members this morning. So check your inbox, click on the link for the self-tape survey if you haven't filled it out yet. Okay, with us today, we have three of our member leaders. Ezra Knight, New York president, was going to join us, but as happens for many of us in this line of work, he has a work conflict. So yay for work, yay for Ezra. But we do have Michele Hurd, National Vice President, Los Angeles, and member of the Los Angeles Local Board. She currently stars in Star Trek Picard and has been a mainstay on television for years, appearing in Blind Spot, Law & Order, SVU, Hawaii Five-0, Daredevil, and countless other shows. Off-screen, Hurd is a longtime champion for diversity and inclusion and safe workspaces. She serves on the National Ethnic Employment Opportunity Committee, EEOC, the Sexual Harassment Prevention Committee, which she chairs, the President's Blue Ribbon Commission on Safety, and many, many others. In 2021, she was presented with the President's Award for Distinguished Service to SAG-AFTRA. Michele, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ben.
We are also joined by another Michele, National Vice President, Midsize Locals, Michele Proude. Michele is a versatile actress from the New England local. Over the past 2 years, Michele has navigated the world of self-tape auditions and landed several roles. Michele, an active SAG-AFTRA member since 1993 and elected volunteer since 2002, is here to share her advice and experience with self-tape auditions to help fellow members feel more confident when recording their auditions at home. Michele, thank you so much for being here. And last but certainly not least, we have National Vice President of Actor Performers, William Charlton. Bill is a working actor who brings a deep understanding of SAG-AFTRA's contracts, along with the issues all working performers face on a day-to-day basis, to effectively advocate for the implementation and development of practical solutions. Serving on several negotiating committees, Bill has helped improve the lives of thousands of members with a relentless focus on residuals, improving wages, and strengthening working conditions, including some of the insanity that we will talk about today surrounding self-taped auditions. Bill, thank you so much for being here. To all of you, I am very excited to dive into this crazy world. I know you all have seen it all, have different perspectives. Whether it's, around the country, in LA, self-tapes, film, TV, commercials, you've seen it all, and you all have been in the industry for a long time and have seen the changes as this has happened. So I want to start by looking at where we are now with auditions. I'm going to use last names for clarity. Michele Proude, what does the self-tape process look like now? And how has that changed compared to before the pandemic? And I know you particularly have a really in-depth perspective on what it may look like outside of the major markets, which may be a little bit different. So curious, what does self-tape process look like now, and what have the changes been since the pandemic?
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I think that one of the things that we realized, even during the commercials discussions around self-taping, is that which market you're in, it can completely vary how self-tapes go. In my market, for sure, self-tapes were an occasional thing prior to COVID. It was kind of like, oh, well, if you can't make it in, then try and send us a self-tape, that sort of thing. Whereas now in my market, which is New England, it's the norm. In fact, it's very rare that a first audition is in person, almost never. It's almost completely just self-tape still. And so it's changed, I think, the way that we look at it. I think all members, when you were asked to do a self-tape and it wasn't something you did regularly, it was a scramble. What is that supposed to look like? How am I supposed to record it? All that sort of thing. And I think what's happened over the last 2.5 years is that we've evolved as the casting process has. And so, now maybe for me, for example, I bought myself a stand, which, I used to duct tape my phone to a chair. I bought myself some lights so that, if it's dark out, I don't have to be excluded from recording something. Just things like that. I at the beginning of the pandemic, I said, because I don't have a blank wall in my house, I said, I can't put up a frame in my, in the middle of my playroom and put a script. Yeah, it's up and it lives there. And people just have to work around it. That's the way it is. So I feel like those are the kinds of things that have changed. And, I hope that when we talk today, for people who still haven't really jumped into the whole self-tape thing, and I know that there are people that still feel anxious about it and have turned down auditions because of it. So I hope that our conversation today really gives people the confidence to give it a go and know that you can keep it simple and you can get the job done right in your own living room or while you're on vacation or, what the heck if you have to from your car.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of those challenges. And Michele Proude, I think you present something that I think is really important. You talked about getting some of the foundational elements of being able to do a self-tape, some lights, your phone, a tripod. But you also said something that I think is so important that I really respect and I want people to grasp onto, which is you said, yeah, part of it is like, it's not perfect. You didn't remodel your house. You didn't, build a self-tape wing. Like resources can be really limited. And some of that is like, I'm going to make sure that they can see me. My lighting is good, but like, yeah, I have a frame in the back. And if casting decides that they're not going to cast me because of what was on my wall, it probably was more about the performance anyway. So I think that's a really healthy perspective. Michele, Hurd, I'm curious if you have thoughts on that, on some of the challenges and maybe ways that you've navigated that. I know you're often traveling or on set and getting self-tapes. So yeah, curious about some of the challenges that you've seen and how you navigate it.
Yeah, I think probably for a lot of us, the biggest challenge that I find is getting somebody to help me with my self-tape. That's the biggest thing. Because if, I'm married to an actor and we're forever in different states. And so like right now, I have a self-tape that I have to put on and I'm waiting for my sister to finish teaching her class so she can come over and help me. So it's, these are the realities of being, asked to do a self-tape when you are used to walking into an audition room where there's somebody sitting there and there's a camera there and you don't have to deal with this. One of the other things that I've really found has helped is finding a really good self-tape app. I use this one, my self-tape app. Super, super simple, super, super easy. I don't have to do any kind of compression. It fills out your the slate, all of that stuff. It starts dark, comes up, has your name, your agency, fades in and out, and you can edit. Super, super, super simple. There's not a cost except for when you send it. every like 3 times you have to buy a ticket, and those tickets are like $10 for 3. So it's really, really a good investment. I do think that if you can, a little bit of investment will help go a long way, like a little backdrop, maybe a ring light, and a self-tape app. And then, make friends with your neighbors or something so that you can get someone in there to help you out. But I do want to say that I don't believe in doing any kind of perfect anything. That's kind of not, I don't like, what is that? I don't even know, like a perfect circle. I don't even know what that looks like, right? So you do the best you can, and they have asked you to do a self-tape. So they have to understand that they have asked you to do a self-tape. I've not been given a lot of direction. I haven't been given, I don't have props. I'm not going to use props because it's in my house. I'm going to do just what I am given. I'm going to tell the story. And that is my job. And what I like to do is I like to take a nice, good, strong point of view when I do it. Since you're not going to give me any direction, I'm going to take the control of it, and I'm going to make my own point of view. And I'll be clear about that. If I'm way off, but they like what I did, then you'll get some feedback, and then they can make the adjustment. I actually think that there's an empowerment that comes with doing self-tapes. There's a lot of, we can always go to a lot of the negatives, but there's also negatives when you had to do 5-10 pages and you had to walk into a room and you're panicked and there's a casting director who's not giving you a lot of time and is only going to give you 1 take, and you didn't feel really good about that. And you walk out of the audition, you're like, God, dang it. I didn't feel like I did my best. When you do a self-tape, not that you should, but you could take the entire day. You could take the entire day to do a self-tape. If you have more than 1 scene, you can change your clothes. You can change your hair. You can give them different looks. That's your power. So to me, yes, there are challenges, absolutely. But I like to enter into things with finding solutions and empowerment. So a little bit of investment, backdrop, a good my self-tape app, finding someone to help you out. That's the biggest thing. And then just make strong choices and let it go. Make that strong choice and then walk away.
I dig it. I dig it. Bill, I'm curious your perspective. We've certainly heard from many members around their unhappiness about spending money on self-tape auditions or, an additional cost compared to in-person. I'm curious if you've had this experience. I know you have some strong thoughts on this.
Yeah, bluntly, I don't think anybody should spend any money on a requested audition. I think it's difficult, and I think what we're faced with here, and I agree with both Michelles in that you want to proactively approach this to the best of your ability. The fact of the matter, there are a lot of people that don't have the ability, or they're technically challenged, or they're being asked for egregious stuff, or they panic and they're going to go to a self-tape room and spend $50 for an audition for a job that might pay them $1,000. And I think we're in a Wild West there. And I think that it's important to follow your own instincts. Like, number one, don't spend money. You may need the small investment like a phone, and Michele just said he's paid $10 for your self-tape app. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna send it through WeTransfer, you deal with it. So I don't, but I do think it's a hard avenue to follow. We were discussing this the other day, that I think if you are going to spend money, you're going to spend money on a coach. So if you have an audition that you need coaching on, then hopefully you have someone that can also tape you at the same time. So you're coaching, so you're getting the benefit of a coaching session while you're taping. I do think it's a minefield, and I think it's a minefield for a lot of people, and finding ways to approach it while we adjust to it, and whether things come back in person or stay, virtual. You're sending auditions off into the cybersphere and never hearing anything back. You have no idea whether anybody's seen them or responded to them or what. So no, I don't think you should spend money on them. And outside of a small investment for maybe a backdrop or a phone and a stand and a ring light. I think we all have ring lights. It's the new, I travel with a little ring light now. So annoying. I'm going to break it. But yeah, that's where I stand with that. And I do think that I do think we're in a very difficult place because people they want to do their best, and actors by and large, want to do the best they possibly can, which means they could overwork a scene, they could spend way too much time on it. I mean, I've heard stories the other day of people recording themselves on a boat and sending that in and booking the job, and that's great. I mean, but a lot of actors it's got to look perfect. I can't have a crease in the backdrop because if I do, they're going to notice the crease and I'm not going to get hired. And we all go down those roads. So we want to try to find a balance as we approach this. And I'll speak later because I know I've been asked to speak later about some of the stuff we got in the commercials contract and what we hope to get in the theatrical contract as it comes down.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm really resonating. Each of you have some unique approaches that works for you. And I think personally, when actors ask me, that is what I say. Like, to Michele, Hurd your point, like, tell the story, focus on the acting. That really is what books the job. Yeah. And as Michele, Proude, you were saying, like, yeah, hey, I've got the basics here so that I'm not stressed, like duct taping a phone. I'm ready to go. I know what my setup is. It's worth that investment. And then the rest of it is going to be on my performance. And I empathize with the challenge, but I think what I would implore actors is, hey, remember, you are there to be an actor, to give a performance. That is ultimately what is going to be the thing that books you the job and books the office and moves your career forward. And in a career that can be hard because there's so much that's out of our control, I think it's easy to get stuck on, oh, but I can control this. And then you're spending half a day for a one-page self-tape. And it's like, no, you don't need to do that. Like, I like being able to take multiple takes. To me, that's one of the benefits of self-tapes. I'm like, oh man, I totally flubbed that one. I wasn't feeling it. Let me do one more, maybe two more. But like, I have a rule for myself. Like, I wouldn't do 10 takes just to get it perfect in the room. And the casting directors I talk to don't need, they say, no, it's okay. Like, you flub a line, you mess a thing, like, we get it. That's what would happen in the room anyway. So, Michele, Hurd, you were like, I refuse to use props. I know for me, sometimes like one or two small props help me, but I'm not doing it for casting. I'm not doing it for the producers. I'm doing it for my performance. And that's what I would say is, like, there's no perfect way. And like, Bill, you were saying, like, hey, you don't need to spend tons of time and money to have the perfect audition. It's like, no, like, focus on the performance. Maybe you're working with a coach. For me, it's my best friend who coaches me on my auditions, who I put on Zoom. I live alone, I have him on Zoom. I did it yesterday. I put a tape on 15 minutes, had one of my friends on Zoom, popped it up. I recorded myself and sent it off. And I booked jobs. I've got commercials airing right now, a movie coming out on Friday, like, that came from self-tapes.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Bill, you did mention the commercials contract, and I do want to dive into that because there are ways, and all of you have been involved in negotiating committees. And for members to know, I think one of the things that can be confusing is that our contracts are with the employers, the studios, the networks, the people making the commercials, not directly with the casting directors. So, the casting directors are getting their orders, as it were, from the employers. And so that's where we, in negotiations of what we can do. And Bill, I would love to hear from you about some context that members may not know about what incredible things have now been put in place in the commercials contract.
Yeah, I think it's important to note for everyone listening to this, whatever local you're in, when a working and wages conditions committee comes up, which we commonly call W&Ws, which people go, what's a W&W? Yeah. Wages and working conditions, two very simple things. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration with the whole world of self-tape. So this round in the commercials arena, when we renegotiated the contract this last fall, we actually brought a lot to play. Most importantly is we felt very strongly contractually that no self-tape audition or even live virtual audition should ask you to do more than what you're asked to do when you walk into a room. So simple backdrop, they can't ask you to run out. I mean, they can ask you, but they can't require you to run out and shoot on your park bench. We've heard people asking you to, film yourself driving your car.
I got that audition.
I know
just
you
throw
did.
up a simple commercial audition, just film yourself driving, doing these things. And then if you could get a take of you getting in the car and opening the trunk and all the insanity. So they can't do that anymore. Is that what you're saying?
They cannot. No, they can't. They can ask you maybe they can ask if you, but they can't require. The only thing they can require you to do is in the commercials contract is basically have a simple backdrop. They also can't ask you to change angles, because I don't know about you, but the minute someone says, could you give us a slate tight on the face and then back up until you get the whole body? I'm like going, who's doing the backing up? Who's doing and also, have you tried to put your whole body in a horizontal frame? I mean, you'd have to be in a warehouse and you'd be a little stick figure in the middle of it, 2 miles away. So things like that, and it's important to know contractually, we don't have a contract with the casting directors. And I think that's important to know but what we do have is a contract with the producers. So for example, in the commercials arena, you're never required ever to learn language. That's because it's in the contract. So they have to have a board for you. They have to provide, and in the new contract, they have to be able to provide you with some sort of way for you to read your script so that you're not trying to learn it, you're not trying to memorize it or anything like that. So we put a lot of these things into the commercials contract so that they can ask you in a self-tape audition to stand on a ladder. We actually argued, believe it or not, about what height, how high up you could stand. I mean, we spent hours arguing about this. It's absurd. We're like, oh, no, you can't stand on anything. And they're like, no, just a foot. We're going, no. I mean, so what my hope is when we go in the TV theatrical and the working wages conditions come up, that we also start getting common sense solutions that we can start to lock down a little bit. I mean, I have a lot of things I have on my plate. Like, I want acknowledgement that you sent in a self-tape. Simple acknowledgement. We got it. Great. Awesome. I want to keep it simple. Like to have as many live Zoom in, kind of audition. These are all things that can come and that we can try to figure out whether we can get them into the contract. It takes a lot of negotiating work to get there, but it's work. So we want people to come and bring their experiences. The one other thing I want to add is during convention, we had a couple of resolutions sponsored about, especially in the low budget contracts, which we come up with our own terms. Basically, it's called promulgated. To actually limit page counts, to say, someone I know got an 11-page audition the other day with less than 24 hours to turn it around. It was basically an 11-page monologue. What do you do with that? How do you address that in a self-tape audition? How do you, and some people, I know there are people that will say, well, I'm going to do a couple pages and I'm just going to read the rest of it. They're just going to have to make it up. But, a lot of actors are going to go, oh, I got to learn this whole thing. I got to really be good because I really want to get this job. And, so it's putting a lot of pressure. So things like that we can bring to play and also hopefully limit. It takes some time for it to work through the committee process, work through the contractual progress that we can actually put them in. So you have contract language that says, no, you can't ask me to learn 12 pages in 2 hours. I mean, you just can't. Yeah. So I hope that covers a lot. There's a lot there to cover. Just show up when your local has a working wages conditions committee meeting, show up with your ideas and your thoughts and the things that you want to bring to play.
Yeah, I think that's so important because the member input really drives so much of this. Michele, Proude, I'm curious, you're deep in this, you're talking to members all the time, hearing the feedback. What, either for yourself as a performer or when people ask you, like, what do you think is the most important part of the self-tape audition? Like, where should members be focusing on? And how have you found that? Obviously you mentioned your own evolution around the approach to self-tapes over the last couple of years. So yeah, what's the advice you have for members on where to put their focus? What should they be caring about?
Thanks, Ben. I mean, I think you actually sort of touched on it before. I think it's so easy to get caught up in recording and, downloading, uploading, transferring, sending, editing, all of that. And we have to just remember our job is acting. It's about the acting. A friend of mine was invited to an audition, and actually casting sort of reached out several times to her, and she wasn't doing self-tapes, and she was like, "Oh, I'm just going to do it." And she recorded it. She realized afterwards that you could see her bare feet and her slate. And I asked her if I could see it, if she would be willing to share it with me. And she showed me what she had recorded. And the sound wasn't perfect. It wasn't really, it was a little out of focus. The lighting wasn't great, but she was good. She was it. And of course she booked that role. And it was such a good reminder to me where to keep my focus. So like all the things I was saying before about having a setup for yourself in your house, whatever it is, something that's your go-to. So it's like going to the studio, so that you don't every time have to go, how do I set this up? What do I do? If that means buying a stand, buying a couple lights, buying a backdrop, then like that's what you would have spent on printing headshots before. It's just part of the cost of doing business. You have your setup. And then I think really for ourselves, we need to just say, look, I'm going to give myself this much time, give myself a half an hour, 15 minutes or whatever it is. I'm going to do it. And it is what it is.
Right.
I mean, blessing and the curse of self-tapes is that you can see what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a perfectionist like me, you might do it 1,000 times. And my son, who's my reader, doesn't like that very much. So I've really tried to change the way I approach it and say, I'm going to do my work. Yes, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to actually send them a few choices, especially if it's something short, if it's just a page or two. I'm going to go ahead and send them, because if I was in the room, what I would do probably is I would do it and they say, all right, let's do one more. Let's try something a little different. So give them a couple of choices, because, as was said, we don't know necessarily, no matter how much research you do, you don't necessarily know what it is that they're looking for or what the angle is. Then a lot of times, especially if it's just a one-liner or something, you really have no clue where this falls. You're a plot device, and so go in and make it your own. Like, it used to always be said, think of every audition as a little performance, and, and really go back to acting one, like, where am I? What's the moment before? What am I fighting for? And play it all the way through. Sometimes when you're in your living room, it's hard to remember that, like, all of that, creating that space. And I think that's the thing. And reminding ourselves and reminding our fellow actors, just keep focused on that piece. I think that's the most important thing.
I love that. Michele, Hurd, I'm curious if you have thoughts on that. And I know, I believe you've booked some big jobs from self-tape, so something's working. What advice do you have as a follow-up on all of this? Michele, Proude, I love those thoughts.
Yeah, Michele P., that was all solid. That was, I'm so there with you. I mean, don't get obsessed about the perfection of it. I oddly enough have a good percentage of getting jobs from my self-tapes. Blind Spot, which was a fabulous villain I got, and that was a next day tape. I gave them, there was 3 scenes. I gave them 1 take each, because I was like, fuck you for the next day tape, sorry. And that was like, 11 or 14 pages. And I was just like, Hurd, but I just did it and sent it off, and I got that one. Star Trek Picard, probably one of the best gigs I've ever had in my entire 30 years in this industry. I got from a self-tape. I sent them 2 takes. The first one, I really liked the beginning, but I didn't like the ending. The second take, I didn't really like the beginning, but I really liked the ending. And I just was like, you know what? I'm not going to obsess over this. I'm not going to try to make a perfect circle. I know what story I'm telling, just like what Michele P. just said. I know I've made choices. I have invested in this character. I'm following it through the end. The two aren't perfect. It's fine. Send it off. And not only did I get that job, but I got it as an offer. Like those two not perfect tapes were perfect enough for the people, the powers that be, to say, she knows what she's talking about. She can do this job. And I really, and I know I said this, my self-tape app. First of all, the self-tape app doesn't cost any money. When things don't cost any money, then you're the commodity, which I understand. But it's only, you only pay like $10 after you've done a few and you've sent it off. And then those tickets last for 3 or 4. And like I'm in New York right now. If I was going to an audition, that's the cost of my train, my Metro card going up and back. If I'm in LA, that's the gas costs more than that. So we're talking like minimal investment. And also let's remind ourselves what we're doing. This is my job. This is not a hobby. This is my job. This is my profession. And I honor this profession, and I can invest in myself. And this is a little investment for a huge outcome. And one of the other things that Michele touched on that I love, and I always say this, sometimes this moment when I self-tape is the only moment I'm going to get to say these words. I'm going to get to say these words. And I have a captive audience, whether they watch it or not. I could care less. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to enjoy exercising my artistry, creating a character, getting to walk in these words for just a moment in time, get my satisfaction of it. I'm not interested in pleasing anybody else. I want to please this person. And one of the most powerful things that I got from a producer, from Michael Chabon, who cast me as Rafi in Star Trek, when we were talking about this, and I think I talked about the self-tape, and I was like, it was not perfect, whatever. What did you guys see? And he said, Michele, you told us who Rafi was. You told us. I'm not trying to figure out who they think I'm going to be. I need to inform them. So that's the thing about really informing your performance, taking that time, respecting yourself. This is our, I'd love to think like, oh, you know what, all the Zoom auditions, the self-tapes, those are going to go away and we're all going to fall right back into what it was like back in the old days. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true. I suspect it's not. I suspect there will always be self-tapes. So let's just take this on as something that's part of our industry, make it not such a, terrible, annoying, frustrating, annoying thing, and take it as just another step in exploring our artistry and getting as many eyes on our performances as we can, because there's a lot more actors who are now being able to be seen because of self-tapes than before. So, as I always say, I try to go for the solution. I try to find the positive because there's so much cray-cray around this world. So why don't we embrace it, own it, empower ourselves, and take that job? Tell them who the character is. Tell them who the character is.
Bill, we've talked about this a lot for this issue for years. And I feel like you have a very healthy perspective on when like some of these crazy unreasonable asks get made. Hey, can you do 10 pages? You mentioned it earlier, 11 pages, 14 pages by tomorrow, like craziness. You mentioned that in the commercials contract, I think, did you talk about the 24 hours? So I'm curious about that piece around commercials contract, and then just your perspective in general of if the request is unreasonable, like what are some thoughts on how members can deal with that? Well,
actually in the TV theatrical contract, it's a 24-hour turnaround. They can't ask that. They do anyway, and invariably, the only thing you can really do is call your agent and say, I need more time. And but those requests still come in. We debated that in the commercials contract, and I think we have a 24-hour language in there, but we also recognize in commercials especially, we're all used to having same-day auditions in commercials. That happens. So I think the best way to deal with an unreasonable request is obviously the first stop is to try to talk to your rep, say, hey, they're asking me to jump out a window and film myself. I'm not comfortable doing that. The other thing, and it helps if you have a lot of experience and what, along the lines of what Michele Hurd was just talking about, telling the story. So if I get something that I think is unreasonable, I go, well, how can I allude to this without actually jumping through the window or taking my clothes off? And
No, we're not going to do ever on a tape, ever,
ever,
anybody,
ever. And we actually got language in that in the commercials contract, as well as the TV theatrical contract last time. So I think the best way to do it is use common sense judgment in terms of how can you relate the story? What are they trying to tell? And because oftentimes your reps may not get back to you. You may not have a good enough rep who can, or you may not have a rep at all who can run interference with you. You might, like in Michelle's market, a lot of the actors in her market all know the casting directors. It's someone they can call up and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this. That's not the case in LA, especially for a lot of working actors. They might know the casting director, but they might not have a personal relationship with the casting director, or they don't want to be a problem. So they don't want to call them up and say, I really don't want to put my leg over my head while I'm trying to do this. So I think that it's using common sense to try to figure out exactly what the story is in terms of how you relate it. And for me, that's the best way to handle it. And the 24-hour thing, they may ask, and you're going to go, well, the contract says I have 24 hours, but you're also going to think, well, I got to get it in because they're not going to care about the contract. They've asked for this. So it puts actors in a strange place. And I just think you have to approach this in a common sense way, at the same time, not knowing whether it's going to be right or wrong. You're just going to put it out there and see how it hits. And I wanted to address, because I thought that was really interesting what Michele was saying. You send the takes, you tell the stories and things like that. A lot of us and a lot of actors don't have a good gauge of their performance when they can watch themselves and say, I don't know which one to send. I don't know if this is good or that's good, or we obsess out about how we said one word or another word or whatever. And I think that's a difficulty in terms of that too, in terms of how you approach that common sense, which is why what I think you said earlier, Ben, about just do a couple takes, choose one, send it, and hope for the best. And I don't think that's a good enough solution for a lot of people, because I think we're left in that sphere of I want to do this right. I want to get this job. I want to give them my piece, and if they hire me, great. If they don't, great. So I hope that answered your question, because I'm starting to ramble.
Yeah, I actually had a friend text me the other day. She's like, hey, I am totally in my head between these two takes. Do you have 5 minutes? Will you look at them? She trusted my perspective, and I shared my thoughts. And I think, Bill, to your point, I think that is part of what we do as performers, actors, dancers, singers, all of us over time, hopefully getting a sense of like when our performances are working or not. But that might be where a trusted friend, maybe you're friends with casting or an acting coach, or, for me, I have a couple actor friends who I really trust to be honest in their feedback of, hey, yeah, you know what? I know you, that one felt a little disconnected. Try again, or try this one. And so working to find that community as much as possible. And at the end of the day, what I've heard all of you saying is like, at the end of the day, send in a take. Like, don't spend 12 hours. Like, at the end of the day, you do, let's send it. Go ahead, Bill.
I do want to address one thing that you said. I mean, as actors, we all have pretty strong communities, people we can rely on, people we can call up on. But, one of my frustrations with the self-tape, and I'm not quite sure how to answer it yet, is free labor. Casting would provide you with the reader. They provide you with the, whatever. And all of a sudden you're relying on your friends to zoom in. You're relying on your husband who's in another state, or your sister to get done teaching, or your son, or, my wife, or whatever. We're relying on someone else to give a reading. And whereas in a casting office, you would have a reader. So that's just free labor. And I think that casting needs to recognize that. And I think that some of the solutions I'd like to see down the road, or using something like the SAG-AFTRA Foundation in LA has a self-tape room, where you can actually access places that you can find someone that can be a reader with you, so that and also addressing that kind of shoving down those expenses on actors, because we all have people that will do it for us. Although I've heard of people saying, my husband sucks at reading. He's so bad. I got to find someone to read with, or vice versa, in terms of, but I just wanted to address that because I think it's an important aspect as we go forward and try to grapple with the world of self-tapes when you have someone like that.
Yeah.
And I just,
yeah, go ahead.
Just about choosing a take. If it's not a quick, hard 24-hour deadline, what I've started doing is I record it and then I sleep on it and then I look at it fresh, and I find that I really have a different perspective. Because when you're in it and you're going through it a few times, maybe you did a few practices and you record it, then all of a sudden you sort of lose track of where you're at. But the other thing I just want to say out loud for all of us to remind ourselves is it's not about giving the performance that you're going to give on the day. It's about them seeing who you are and what you bring to the role. And Michele Hurd said that. And so I just think we have to keep pushing ourselves back there and say, whether or not I'm nurse number one, this is how I would be nurse number one.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to do it. And, the blessing and curse of self-tapes, they're seeing more people. So on the one hand, I've had more auditions in the last 2.5 years than I ever have in my lifetime. Like, it's unbelievable how many auditions I've had, but I'm also booking a smaller percentage of them. And that's kind of the trade-off. And it's hard not to take it personally. And so that's why the things we can control are thinking of it as a performance every time, getting coaching, working with friends. I think community is really important. And, working at, again, if you have a friend who has a great self-tape setup, that's a win-win. If you can help each other out, pop over, do some self-tapes together. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that part in too.
Yeah. And I'll just one other little input of that. Loved all that, both of you guys. The dauntingness of a lot of pages. So that sucks for everybody. It sucks for everybody. You have a lot of options. You can hold it. You can paste it all around your camera, put them in big, bold print, since I need my glasses now. You can do all that stuff. There's also another kind of exercise that you can try. When you get a job, you often will get a lot of pages, new pages the night before you shoot. And, that's a reality. That's a reality. So how do you do that? How do we do that? I have a job. I've been hired. They gave me new pages. It's a lot of pages. I'm totally freaking out. I have a 5 a.m. call. How do I do this? This is a nice exercise on learning how to calm down, how to ingest the lines, knowing that it's only going in your short-term memory. You're going to be able to let it go very soon, but just be able to learn how to do that in a calm, empowering way, because it's just setting you up. It's just setting you up for success later on, because these kind of things do happen. You will get pages and you won't have enough time to memorize, and yet you'll be on camera. So it's a great exercise.
Yeah, you all addressed a lot of the questions that we had come in from members, looking at, the benefit perhaps of there being more actors being able to be seen for a role. And I know that that's part of these conversations, as well as, I certainly hear concerns about whether or not our tapes are being watched. I've booked most of my resume has been self-tapes, interestingly. And so, as one member, I know, at least some, they're getting watched sometimes. And my experience is, if they're requested, casting is often watching it. I'm sure that's not always happening, but being mindful that there may be more opportunities and that can be a benefit. I've seen that in the last few months. There are auditions I've gotten. I'm like, I do not think I would have gotten an in-person audition for this with fewer people. I really don't. And then I've gotten callbacks and producer sessions and those other pieces. So being mindful about that.
Also, Ben, just the concept of going into a room and being put on tape doesn't assure that those tapes are seen.
Yeah, those are not necessarily going to producers. I'm curious if any of you have experience. We had a question from a member about how or are we able to get feedback from a casting director about the self-tape audition, and I'm curious I have some thoughts of things that I've had with my reps, but I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts on ways to or ability to get feedback from casting.
Yeah, you know, another actor actually asked me this just the other day, and here's my take, just my personal take. If casting wants to give me feedback or direction, perfectly happy. Give me direction and I will take it. I'm not really interested in getting the feedback from casting because I didn't get that job. I don't need you to tell me why I didn't get the job. I didn't get the job. I know that. If I sucked, if I sent in a not perfect tape and the person still wanted me, I'd still get that job. Just because you think you did a perfect thing doesn't mean you get the job. There's other reasons. There is a whole bunch of other reasons that people are cast or not cast. I'm lucky that my husband's a executive producer of a show that he just did. And so like a little butterfly on his shoulder, I was able to watch some auditions with him and his producers because they were sent. It was never about this person sucks, this person's great, let's keep them. It was about the picture, the tone, the style of how the actor brought those words to life. So for myself, I don't necessarily need to call, and this is learned. Back in the day, I absolutely, almost after every audition, I was like calling my agent. I was like, well, find out what they said. What did they say? Da, da, da. At a certain point, that's not necessarily helpful for me, for someone to tell. It's like asking a person why they don't want to date you. I don't need to know why you're not into me. You're just not into me. So for me, it's not necessarily helpful. I love getting direction. I love being able to reach out to a casting director and get direction. Love to get callback information direction, but to call a casting director and ask them for the words of them to say they went another way, how does that feed me?
Yeah, I had a lot of that experience even before, pre-COVID in-person auditions. My experience was even when my reps were really good about following up and getting feedback, it was almost always, yeah, he was good, we went another way. Like that was, it was rare that there was like actual helpful feedback. And I will say I've gotten, I don't remember what project it was, but I had a self-tape and they sent back a note like, oh, hey, they sent a redirect and, I retaped it. And so I have seen that happen. And I'll notice now, I think casting is getting better about having a better sense of what they want sometimes, and it'll come in the breakdown. Hey, this character is really subtle and calm and don't play the comedy really hard, or I don't know, whatever the note is. And that's rare. I'm not saying that is happening all the time. And it can be hard when it's like, is it good? Am I good? Do people like me? Like, did anybody watch it? So I really empathize with that challenge.
Ben, just to jump on that, the one thing, the proactive, empowering thing that an actor can do, I feel, is if you get your audition, you see your breakdown, you read your sides, and you're confused at something. At that moment, prior to putting yourself on tape, call your agents, managers, whatever, send an email and say, could you ask casting for more specificity about the tone of this character, whatever, prior to.
Yes.
Get that information, then you feel like you're empowered, and then you do your best job. You do your best.
Yeah. I have my best friend who I tape auditions with all the time had that exact thing where there was a character and it was like unclear. Do you want, I forget the accent. It was like an Israeli accent. Like it seems like that character might have it, but it's not clear. It's not specified. Do you want that? And I think even in that case, I don't remember if they heard back or not. And I think they sent one of each, to what Michele Proude said earlier, like, hey, I can do it. Here's one, here's another, and it wasn't a massively long audition. It wasn't like, oh, now I have to take another half day and learn an accent. It was like, oh, he already could do it. So yeah, that proactive reaching out. I'm curious.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Michele.
Add to that, I think that whatever method you used for asking those questions when we used to all be in person should be the same. So like, again, in my market, a lot of members don't have agents. And even the ones who do, like me, there's a lot of direct connection with casting here. That's just the way that this market works and always has worked. And so just a quick email is really not offensive to anybody. a quick email saying, a clarification on this, or, just a question. I had said before I had an audition, I sent it, and then I got an audition for the exact same role again. And I was like, obviously the first one didn't work, but it was an adjustment. It wasn't a callback. So I just emailed casting and said, could you just give me an adjustment? And it was like, sure, here it is. And, we just have to remember, I feel like, again, we tie ourselves up in knots. We're not wanting to be difficult, but asking a question is always okay. If you're in person or if you're remote, ask a question. So.
Yeah,
I love that.
I would agree with that. And I think that, and what Michele Hurd said, both Michelles, it's important to ask up in front. It's like to get clarity and to get some sort of direction if you're confused. We all live in a business where we want feedback from time to time, just to know that we're on the right track. And I think the most feedback you're ever going to get is, hey, we're sending it to producers, and that was the same whether it was in person or self-tapes or whatever. And I think it's important to remember that oftentimes casting directors are doing 5 choices for most of the roles, and they're sending them off. And and I have friends that direct nighttime television. I know that they're only seeing the choices. They're not seeing anything that's gotten back, and that comes down to the casting director. So it's important to remember that you're just doing your best work and you're putting it out there. And oftentimes you're not going to get any feedback. The feedback is you got the job. You might hear from time to time, we're sending it to producers, which is great. In the commercial world, you might be put on a veil, or in New York, I think they still call it first refusal. You might get that, which still doesn't mean you get the job. It just means that you're in the running, so it's hard. And I just have to tell you, this is commercially, this is years ago. I remember I had auditioned for something, and I was standing in the lobby for a movie at 84th and Broadway. There used to be a Lowe's Theater there. And this producer walked up to me and she said, "Oh my goodness, I am so happy to see you. We almost booked you, but we didn't." And I remember thinking to myself, that was nice. It was very nice that said, but I didn't get the job. It was like, there's the almost ran. I always thought I thought it was sweet on some level, but on the other hand, I'm like going, it's information I really didn't need to have. I almost got a job, but I didn't. But I think it's the same in this world. The feedback is, you just have to keep plugging away, and hopefully you'll land a few jobs and hang in there.
I resonate with that. And one thing that has really supported me in my mindset, I've heard many casting directors say, a callback is a booking and a veil is a booking. And we're all aware that it's not. Like, my bank account reflects those things very differently, but taking that as positive feedback. I hear actors sometimes that go, "Oh man, this casting office has called me in 10 times and they haven't booked me. Like, they must not like me." It's like, no, they love you. They have limited spots. You are in the top 1% of actors, even just to get an audition, generally, like by the numbers. And for me, reminding myself of like celebrating every step as a win. I had an audition process a few months ago where like I had the audition. It was for a film that was going to be super fun. I had the audition, had a callback, had a live Zoom producers, chemistry read, didn't book it. But for me, reminding myself, there's part of me that's disappointed, and that's okay. But also like, hey, that's a good thing. Like, they clearly saw something they liked. And at that point, that is the role that they were going to get from me. And if they wanted somebody taller or more handsome or whatever the thing is, like, I can't control that, but that's a good thing. And taking that as like, that's good. If the same office is calling you in, if you're getting callbacks, you're moving along in the process, reminding myself like, that's a win. I'm celebrating that. Even if I don't book the job, like, that's still a celebration. Even getting the audition, like, there are probably thousands of actors, especially in my category, like thousands of actors who did not get that audition. Like, that's a win that I even got asked to play. And as I think the Michelles both mentioned, like, that's my opportunity to give a performance and to share that. And like, what a gift that is. Quick question, and then we'll take final thoughts and move us on to the rest of our day. We had a question from a member about some auditions and maybe commercial or even theatrical, like the request of, hey, do a little video, like, tell us about yourself, or, something that's just more natural, getting to know you. And I'm curious if any of you have any ideas on the best way to go about that. the member was asking, what's the best way to make sure the casting director watches the whole video or stays entertained? So curious if you all have found something that works.
Just if you have a cute little story, just some cute little story that's personal and makes you smile and might make the other person smile, something unique to yourself. Doesn't have to be deep, doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be, change the world, but just something so that you don't have to sort of do a vamping, like a improv vamping that you sort of like, start talking about, you don't even know what you're talking about. Just a cute little story, in and out. Again, short and sweet, short and sweet.
Story. It's almost as if we're professional storytellers. I dig that.
What?
I dig that. I so appreciate everybody's thoughts on all of the things around self-tapes, the pros, the cons, how we can navigate them. I think my takeaway certainly is the more that we can empower ourselves as performers and as the community, as opposed to trying to get it right or have the perfect video or the perfect editing or the perfect props or the perfect lines. Hey, let's empower ourselves and it can be hard when the request may sound different or actually be different, but to just trust ourselves to say, yeah, you know what? Anybody watching this has probably spent thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours working on telling a story, having an opinion, giving a take. And the more that we can empower ourselves to remind ourselves that that's really what they are paying us to do, is to give a performance, to tell a story, to have an opinion, and coming back to that is the most important thing. And to do what we can to set ourselves up to win around the equipment and the location and making it easy, whether it's an app or learning how to do a quick edit on free software on your computer, whatever that is for you, that hopefully takes some of that challenge out of the process, but to just come back to telling the story. I think that's a really wonderful message. And I so appreciate all of you being here to share. Any final thoughts?
The only thing I'd say is please, the WWs that Bill is just talking about, really important. Anytime you've got any of our members have any issues, any thoughts, anything that they want to discuss, as a board member, I want to hear from you. I only know what people tell me who are in my, who send in information. So please, be active, be proactive. This is your union. These are your sets, your contracts. Let us know what's going on with you.
I double agree with that. Double emphasize that. And Michelle's going to triple emphasize it.
I would add to that, know your contracts, know what's in there, know what the producer's obligations are. And if you find that it's being violated, then reach out to your local staff. That's
in real time.
Don't post it on social. Go actually pick up the phone and call, send an email. Like, that's what our staff is there for. And what our union is to negotiate our contracts and keep us safe on set. That's the job of the union. And so take advantage of that. You're a union member and you have these protections. So let the union do its job.
I love that so much. And because I always get this question, you can do that anonymously. Like you don't have to, it's not going to come back. Oh my gosh, casting Hurd that this man knows. It's anonymous. And all of our, staff that are paid every day to work on this who want to help can only do things if they know what's going on. So Michele P., I love that you shared that. Michele, Bill, thank you so much for being here. And to everybody who sent in questions, who's being involved, who has been requesting information on this, self-tapes is something that I know that the people on this Zoom and otherwise have been talking about and dealing with for years and years. And I so appreciate everyone who's filled out the survey. Any other SAG-AFTRA members watching, please go check that email, fill out the survey. It won't be open for that much longer, but we want to hear from you. What are your experiences? What's working, what's not? What are the pros and cons so that we can use that information to better what we're providing to the members. So to today's guests, Michele Hurd, Michele Proude, Bill Charlton, everybody watching, we appreciate you taking the time to let our members know what SAG-AFTRA is doing to make this an industry standard that's reasonable and safe for our members as we continue to navigate this changing industry. And as a reminder to everyone watching, the presentation is available as a replay on YouTube. So watch, share with your friends, go back to the YouTube channel, review it anytime. And on behalf of the whole team here at SAG-AFTRA, I want to thank you so much for watching, spending your valuable time with us. And a special thanks to our regular viewers who've been tuning in each week for our PTEOE President's Task Force on Education, Outreach, and Engagement live streams. If you have ideas for topics you want to see us cover, please email us, pteoe@sagaftra.org. And before you go, if you haven't already, please subscribe to SAG-AFTRA's YouTube channel to get updates on all of this wonderful content that we're posting. Thank you, everybody, so much. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next time.